when a perfect marriage turns into a game of survival. He was a successful businessman, and she was the owner of a cozy cafe. 13 years together, trust, support, stability. But one day, he appeared in her life, a mysterious Serbian man with the charm of a romance novel hero. At first, it was just innocent conversations, then long walks, and then lies. When the husband realized he was losing not only his wife, but also his dignity, he decided to act. But how far would he go to regain control? Betrayal, revelation, revenge. Who will come out victorious in this game? Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watched this video from. Now, let's get started. My wife and I have shared 13 years of marriage. Before that, we spent just over a year dating, completely certain that we were soulmates. But lately, I've begun to wonder if that certainty was ever real. I have a steady career. Alongside my brothers, I co-own a jewelry business that we built from the ground up. What started as a modest endeavor has grown into a thriving and lucrative enterprise, something we take immense pride in. While many caution against mixing family with business, for us, it's been nothing but a success. We've always had a strong relationship, devoid of the usual sibling rivalries that often cause professional partnerships to crumble. Meanwhile, my wife pursued her own aspirations. She opened a quaint cafe where patrons could indulge in pastries, sip coffee, and immerse themselves in books. Books have always been a defining part of her identity. She's the kind of person who views literature as more than just a hobby. It's an integral piece of who she is. Before I met her, I found that level of enthusiasm a bit excessive, maybe even annoying. But over time, I learned to accept it. Call it hypocrisy if you want, but I genuinely wanted to see her succeed. I even helped pay the rent for her cafe, given its upscale location and steep costs. Covering that expense allowed her business to finally become profitable, and watching her thrive brought me joy. That's the backdrop. Now here's where things started to shift. At some point in March, she mentioned a new customer. She described him as incredibly handsome. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it. We've always been comfortable talking about other people's looks without it causing tension. But something about how she spoke of him felt different. She likened him to the brooding, rugged heroes in her beloved romance novels. Yes, she's a fan of those kinds of stories. From what I've seen, many women obsessed with reading also gravitate toward those over-the-top, dramatic love stories. I've never understood the appeal, but if it makes her happy, I let it be. At first I dismissed it. But the way she described him, her choice of words, reminded me of the way she once gushed about a Russian assassin character from one of her books, a man who fell in love with a woman he met in their apartment complex's laundry room. No, I'm not making that up. That's the kind of story she finds compelling. That day, she only mentioned him in passing, but the very next evening, she brought him up again, saying they had talked for quite a while. From that conversation alone, I learned he was Serbian, had worked as a car dealer, and had recently moved to the US in search of better opportunities. He was struggling to settle in, but was trying to land a job at a local dealership. Within 10 minutes, I knew he was tall, blonde, well-dressed, spoke with an accent, and had a refined taste in books, particularly westerns and fantasy epics like The Lord of the Rings. My wife talks about her customers all the time, so initially, I chalked it up to her usual storytelling. But there was something about her tone. She wasn't just recounting an interaction. She was romanticizing it, almost as if she were turning this man into one of her fictional protagonists. Fortunately, the fascination seemed to fade, and she stopped bringing him up as frequently. That was a relief. He was just another regular at her cafe, not a main character in our nightly conversations. One afternoon, I even visited her cafe to drop off lunch and spotted a man in the corner who perfectly matched her description. There was no doubt in my mind. That was Peter. and then things started getting strange. One evening, she walked through the door wearing a dreamy, almost giddy expression. When I asked what had put her in such a good mood, she casually revealed that Peter had walked her home. They had spent the journey deep in conversation about books, and before parting ways, he had asked her out on a date. She told me she declined, explaining that she was married. According to her, Peter was immediately apologetic, took her hand in a gentlemanly way, wished her a good night, and left. I asked why that encounter had made her so happy. Her response? It felt like something straight out of a book. That irritated me. She was treating these interactions with Peter as though they were lifted from the pages of her favorite romance novels. Still, I tried to be rational. She had been upfront about his advances and had made it clear that she was married. If she wanted to, she could have easily lied about her marital status. So I pushed my unease aside, convincing myself there was no reason to overreact. Ignoring that feeling was a mistake. About a week later, she came home holding a bouquet of flowers and immediately placed them in a vase. When I asked where they came from, she nonchalantly admitted that Peter had given them to her. Nothing significant, just a small token of appreciation for all the support she had shown him while he was job hunting. That was when my patience snapped. She spoke as if she were completely oblivious to the implications of receiving flowers from a man who had already expressed interest in her. So I asked her outright. Did she not realize that Peter liked her? She admitted that, of course, she knew. After all, he had asked her out. But she insisted the flowers were just a kind gesture, nothing more. That was absolute nonsense. Any man with common sense knows that if you ask a woman out and she turns you down, you don't follow up with flowers unless you're still trying to win her over. It wasn't about a friendly gesture. He was testing boundaries, and given how effortlessly she was indulging him, I knew he wasn't going to stop anytime soon. I was right. 2 days later, she arrived home much later than usual. Almost 2 hours past the time she normally returned. She hadn't mentioned staying out late, which was already unusual. I called her twice. No answer. Instead of blowing up her phone, I chose to wait. And that's when everything truly began to fall apart. Just as I was about to call her for the third time, the door swung open, and she stepped in, practically buzzing with excitement. "You won't believe the night I had," she blurted out, immediately diving into a long-winded story. Apparently, she had guided Peter to the museum, and afterward, they grabbed a slice of American pizza, something he had always wanted to try after seeing it in movies. They spent the evening strolling through the city, talking, eating, and engaging in various activities I had no interest in hearing about. Still, I let her spill it all out. When she finally finished, I met her gaze and asked, "Are you attracted to Peter?" Her expression shifted instantly. Shock, maybe even offense. She denied it without hesitation, assuring me that I was the only person she had feelings for. She insisted she was just being kind, showing hospitality to someone in a foreign country with no friends or connections. Her reasoning made sense, but something about it didn't sit right with me. So, I made it clear, she needed to stop seeing him. That, of course, sparked a heated argument. She accused me of being insecure, said I was overreacting, and insisted I had no reason to feel threatened. She went on, but none of it eased my frustration. Even so, I kept my emotions in check. I didn't yell. I simply held my ground. I told her she could interact with Peter at the cafe since he was a customer, but beyond that, it had to end. To drive my point home, I asked how she'd feel if the situation were reversed. If a Serbian woman had come in to buy a bracelet, and I had decided to take her on a personal tour of the city. She dismissed the idea, claiming she'd understand, but we both knew that wasn't true. By the end of it, I found myself sleeping on the couch. No surprise there. The only silver lining? The topic of Peter seemed to vanish from our conversations, which did wonders for my peace of mind. I knew they'd still see each other at the cafe, but that was a controlled environment. As long as she continued coming home at her usual time every night, I chose to let it go. And for a while, things seemed normal, until one day when I unexpectedly stopped by her cafe and she was nowhere to be found. Peter wasn't there either. That alone didn't prove anything, but her unexplained absence? That was a red flag. I debated whether to wait for her return or ask an employee where she had gone, but I didn't want to cause a scene. Instead, I headed back to my car across the street. Just as I was about to leave, I saw them. She and Peter were walking side by side, their arms intertwined. Every instinct screamed at me to confront them right then and there, to unleash all the anger boiling inside me. But somehow, I held back. I remained in my car, watching as they disappeared into the cafe. Then, I drove away. That was yesterday. Processing it has been torment. I wanted to confront her the moment she got home, but I forced myself to wait. There's an advantage in knowing something the other person doesn't realize you know. It allows you to see through their deception. So, I played it cool. When she walked through the door, I casually asked about her day. She recounted an uneventful work shift, making no mention of spending time with Peter. That was all the confirmation I needed. And that brings me to now. Should I confront her outright, or should I gather more evidence first? I'm leaning toward the latter. Something bigger is happening here, and if I act too soon, I might never uncover the full truth. Update. I found more than I ever wanted to. It took time to muster the courage, but I knew I had to get to the bottom of this, no matter how much it hurt. I had never been the kind of person to invade my partner's privacy, but I shoved aside my moral reservations. The truth mattered more. The first opportunity came while she was asleep. I took her phone and went straight to her messages. As expected, Peter's name was there. They had been talking non-stop on WhatsApp. I exported their entire chat to a text file and sent it to myself, making sure to erase any trace of what I had done. Then, I checked her gallery. There were several photos of them together, laughing in different locations across the city. Nothing blatantly incriminating, but enough to deepen my suspicions. I sent those to myself as well and deleted the evidence. It took less than 5 minutes to go through everything and put her phone back exactly as it was. Then, I picked up my own phone and started reading. If she had woken up and caught me, I would have come up with an excuse. But she didn't, and what I found made my stomach churn. One conversation stood out among the rest. They had been discussing a book my wife had recommended to Peter. For clarity, let's call her Miranda. Peter. The way the main characters remind me of us, Miranda. Miranda. Yes. That's exactly what I thought. The brooding, mysterious hunk and the artsy girl who's torn between him and her boyfriend. Peter. And passionate, intimate scenes. This part especially reminds me of us. Miranda. I agree. Intimacy is always good. Peter. Except in your case, it's a husband. Peter sent a laughing emoji. Miranda. Yes. And I think that's what makes it even more exciting and fun. Peter. It feels so wrong. I've never cheated before, but I can't say I properly regret it. Miranda. It is wrong, but that's what makes it so hot. Peter. Yep. And I never want this to end. Reading that sent a firestorm of rage through me. I had to leave the house before I did something reckless. I walked aimlessly through the streets, my mind racing, my vision blurring with the weight of betrayal. It felt like I had been wandering for hours. When I finally checked my phone, it was only 3 a.m. Now I know, and I have no idea what to do next. She was still sound asleep. Have you ever felt the gut-wrenching horror of realizing you've been deceived, only to discover that your partner is actually basking in her betrayal? It wasn't just the unfaithfulness that broke me. It was the sheer delight she took in keeping me oblivious. If she had shown even a shred of guilt, perhaps the sting would have been slightly less sharp. But the thrill she got from sneaking around, that was the final straw. When I got home that night, she was still lost in dreams, utterly unaware. I grabbed her phone and went straight to the damning part of her conversation with Peter, using her own device to record every incriminating message. I needed undeniable proof, something irrefutable. Miranda had deluded herself into thinking she was starring in some grand, forbidden love story, straight out of the novels she adored. But casting me as the clueless fool in her fantasy? That was a cruelty I wouldn't tolerate. She had no idea that her little game was over. The divorce was already in motion, and there was no turning back. And Peter? He wouldn't escape unscathed either. I didn't know exactly how I'd make him suffer yet, but I was determined that they'd both feel the kind of agony that cuts straight to the soul. Update. It's done. And it was magnificent. The final chapter of the adulterous Miranda and her Serbian lover has been written. They never realized they should have feared me far more than they did. Let's skip the mundane details. One morning, as Miranda went about her usual routine, I took an Uber and positioned myself across the street. From my spot, I had the perfect view as a process server waltzed into the cafe and handed her the divorce papers in front of everyone. Watching her face crumble in real time, absolutely priceless. I didn't wait around for the fallout. I had seen what I needed. I continued my day as if nothing had happened, enjoying my work and the refreshing silence that followed. No desperate calls, no pathetic attempts at reconciliation. That void of communication was a symphony to my ears. She knew she was caught. There was no way to undo it. At least, that's what I assumed. That night, she came home in pieces, mascara streaked, nose running, completely wrecked. For a brief second, I almost pitied her. Almost. Maybe some long-forgotten remnants of love stirred within me. But they faded as quickly as they came. Through sobs, she kept demanding answers. What had she done? Was this about Peter? That's when it hit me. She had no clue just how much I knew. She was fumbling in the dark, trying to assess the damage, wondering if she had left any loose ends. I considered exposing everything, but instead, I let her believe I had only seen them together once, strolling arm in arm. Her whole demeanor shifted. The begging became defensive, the pleading laced with veiled insults. She called me ridiculous for ending a marriage over something so minor. Sure, she admitted it was wrong to meet up with him, but insisted I was overreacting, jealous, insecure. She oscillated between groveling and gaslighting, unsure which would get her what she wanted. I made the decision easy for her. I told her to pack her things and leave, and she did. That was the official beginning of the divorce process, and let me tell you, it was exhilarating. I had more assets at risk, sure, but I also had the resources to secure top-tier legal counsel. If you ever find yourself in this situation, do yourself a favor. Hire the best lawyer money can buy. It's worth it. With the texts, the pictures, and the subtle confrontations I had previously staged about her behavior, my attorney built an ironclad case. But the real dagger? The financial records? Transactions from our shared account that lined up perfectly with messages where Peter gushed over gifts and fancy dinners. She had been using my money to fund her affair. My lawyer painted her as a scheming, opportunistic gold digger, and watching her squirm in court was a spectacle I thoroughly enjoyed. She tried to fight back, but there was nothing she could use against me. I wasn't flawless, but I was clean. By the time everything was settled, I walked away with everything I needed. I kept the house, I kept the car, and thanks to the undeniable proof of her infidelity, not to mention the fact that I had already helped her set up a business, there was no alimony. The judge saw right through her. The only thing she got to keep was the car I had originally gifted her. A small price to pay for my victory. Now, about Peter. Making him suffer was trickier, but I found my opportunity. One afternoon, I followed him as he left the cafe, tracking his steps down a quiet street. When the moment was right, I called his name. He turned, confused, and before he could react, I drove my fist into his jaw. The impact split his lip, sent him stumbling. It hurt like hell, but the satisfaction was worth every ounce of pain. He was too stunned to retaliate. Maybe he knew he had no justification, no moral ground to stand on. He simply got up and walked away. I wanted to do more, but anything beyond that would have invited legal trouble. Still, knowing he'd walk around with the mark of my fury, that was enough. Miranda's misery, however, was far from over. Remember the cafe I had been paying rent for? Well, the next payment loomed, and with its prime location, it wasn't cheap. When the deadline arrived, she called me, her voice trembling. She begged for help, pleaded for just one more favor. But I was done. I told her to sell her car if she needed money that badly, and hung up. The calls continued for days, each one met with silence. Eventually, she sold the car. I knew this because she called me just to curse me out. Apparently, I was the heartless one, the villain for abandoning her at her lowest. I simply reminded her of how thrilling she had found sneaking around. Her only response was silence. Now, I wait. If karma is real, she'll lose the cafe too. Without my financial support or my bookkeeper covering her mistakes, her failure is inevitable. Watching everything she built crumble has been the most gratifying part of all. And me? I'm standing strong, single, financially secure, and completely at peace. Don't get me wrong, the betrayal and divorce were brutal. But in the end, you either let the past consume you or you move forward. And that's exactly what I'm doing. To everyone who offered advice and support, you have no idea how much it meant. You helped me reclaim my life. This story has come to an end. Betrayal is not just infidelity. It is a blow that shatters trust and destroys years of shared life. In this story, we see how one reckless step can turn love into war and romantic fantasies into a real tragedy. But the most important thing is not the betrayal itself, but how you respond to it. You can break down, drown in resentment, or you can pull yourself together, gather evidence, and come out victorious. Do not let betrayal destroy you. Respect yourself, protect your boundaries, and remember, in the end, the truth is always stronger than the lie. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you liked this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you.